so much for coming out. My name is Nick Coleman, the director of Globalization Academy. So it's so nice to see so many faces, young faces, and less young faces that are all interested in what we're doing here. So thank you for coming out. A special thank you to our delegates from Hong Kong, Mexico, Czech Republic, and Costa Rica, who made the journey, brave the traffic to get up here through Atlanta. So glad to have you here. Thank you very much. We'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves here in a moment. It's really great to be a part of this academy. It's one of the exciting things about being in Globalization Academy is that we get to do events like this, to have an opportunity to be able to interact with people who really are embodying the ideals of globalization and a global focus and thinking outside of our own little bubbles that we maybe live in. So thank you again for coming out tonight. Ms. Darling is going to be our moderator tonight. We also have and we have our freshman cohort of the Globalization Academy who's done their research on these countries and our ambassadors and are going to be able to ask some thought-provoking questions and have a great conversation here tonight. So thank you all for coming, and I will turn it over to Ms. Darling.
Hello, I am Ms. Darling. I will be moderating the event tonight. I won't be asking questions, the kids will be asking questions. I'll just kind of be guiding the in-between time. At this point in time, I would love to extend the opportunity to all of our panelists to get an opportunity to introduce themselves and a little bit about themselves or their country or anything they would like us to know. So we will start here with Costa Rica, and we'll just kind of go across the tables here. So go ahead. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Flora Lia Venegas Corrales. As you may know, my name is quite long. And why is quite long? Because we have first name, middle name, and two last names. First last name is our father's last name. Second last name is our mother's last name. Why? Because we women in Costa Rica never lose our last name. Even though we get married, we still keep our last name. Saying this, very, very honored for you to have me here today. I will hope, and I already shared with my nice group of women some of my experiences. I hope to share with you a little bit more of it, and I'm willing to answer your questions.
My name is George Novak. My middle initial Elvis, which is from my grandpa, and I came to the United States in 1968. I left Czechoslovakia when the Russians invaded us in August, and ran over to Austria. From there I got visa to the United States because my roommate, schoolmate, and ski partner escaped 10 years before and was teaching at Georgia Tech. So my destination was Atlanta because of my relationship to another escapee from communism. Professionally, I'm an architect, but I left my profession hanging on somewhere else and became a construction manager. I still have a company which does construction management of industrial projects. I'm practically retired, but still, you never retire when you have your own company.
My name is Gene Hanratty. I've lived here in Atlanta since 1990. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in the Army and Special Forces. And it was sort of through that, as they expected me to be bilingual. They sent me to the Defense Language Institute to learn Chinese. I didn't use it much in the Army, but it's paid great dividends ever since. I serve right now as the senior consultant to the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in New York. And then ipso facto, since we have a Hong Kong Association here in Atlanta, as the executive director of it. And I'm very pleased to be able to be with you here tonight because Hong Kong this year, on July 1st, will be celebrating its 20th anniversary for what we call a handover. So I'll be looking forward to your questions to talk to you about all that.
Hello, my name is Javier Diaz de Leon, long name too. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I've been a Mexican diplomat for about 25 years. Most of my career I have served in postings in the United States. I am a strong believer in the United States-Mexico relationship as a very strong and very vibrant relationship that affects more lives than probably any other bilateral relation in the world between two countries. I can talk about that later. But very thrilled to be here. I am the Consul General of Mexico here in Atlanta. And right here in Atlanta, we represent Mexico and serve Mexican nationals in Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. And thank you so much for having me here tonight with you.
Briefly before we begin the question round, I was going to go over several ground rules for not only the audience but also for our panelists. All questions for the audience to know have been approved ahead of time by our panelists and been seen and approved. The first round of questions, we will go in alphabetical order down the tables. And the question, if possible, will be asked in the native language of the country and then asked again in English, and then the response will be given in English. After a panelist has answered a question, the stage is going to be open to any of you to be able to respond and give your country's point of view on that particular topic. And there's no need to wait for a signal to speak. You can just kind of wait for the person who's speaking to kind of finish, and then you can jump in with your information. Additional comments can be with the intent to agree or disagree, but please keep in mind that the intent is to maintain a positive atmosphere for our learners and our students and our parents. We'd love to have an organic and free dialogue to exist between all of you, so please feel free to speak at any time. That's some of our best information that we get when you guys are able to engage in discussion. Remember that this is a celebration of diversity for everyone, of thought, and the opportunity that we have to hear global perspectives on global issues. And we want to maintain that atmosphere that makes this occasion possible, and thank you to everyone who came tonight. We will begin our round of questions, and our very first question will be for Consul General Venegas Corrales from Costa Rica. It will be asked by Shelley Bohm and translated by Ashlyn Cheever.
Buenas noches, Consul General Venegas Corrales. Costa Rica es conocida por su ecoturismo que incluye equitación, caminatas y la observación de aves. Con 2 millones de turistas que vienen cada año, ¿hay posibilidad de dañar el medio ambiente? Good evening, Consul General Venegas Corrales. Costa Rica is known for its ecotourism, which includes horseback riding, hiking, and bird watching. With about 2 million tourists coming every year, the potential for human contact damaging the environment increases. What policies do you have in place to prevent environmental degradation?
Okay.
As you may know, Costa Rica is known because of its ecotourism. You can say Costa Rica is its birthplace. We have set laws in order to protect an environment, and we also try to make conscious about environmental protection. Once you get to Costa Rica, the first thing you may notice as a tourist is that tourist guides are going to request you to follow certain rules. Certain rules as what? As if you go to certain beach, you cannot turn on your radio, you can't film, you can't use flashes or flashlights at night. Why? Because we do not want to disobedient animals. We also have policies to be energy sufficient. We use alternative energy, and last year we used 99% of electricity coming from wind and solar panels. So it's a main thing to do. We also have a very strong culture about our I can't say it. Let me say about our impact on Earth. Okay, so since we are very little, they teach us how to recycle, how to save electricity, how to save water. So the system is designed, and the government has invested a on setting a structure to maintain Costa Rica's nature. And also, if you're thinking about hiking, well, we are a small country, but we are very, very diverse. We have a lot of paths to walk around, and we only allow certain number of people per year to some of the places. So I guess this is the way that we have learned to keep our forests and our resources.
Would anyone else like to comment on ecotourism?
I can speak a bit about Hong Kong. Hong Kong, I like to refer to it as a city-state of some 7.2 million people right now. And think about this, they had 60 million visitors last year, 60 million. And most of them coming down, 2/3 of them, 40 million of them from mainland China. And they're coming down here so that they can see something where there's an open society. And they try to come in also for medical purposes. A lot of women try to sneak across the border to have their babies. They come across and do just vast amounts of shopping, which is causing some problems for the residents there. We can get into that later. But they also like to travel, if they can get a visa that's long enough, to travel out of Hong Kong on the new tourist, from the new tourist facility that they've got there for tourist boats, for the big luxury liners that they have there on. But there's just a lot of things that they can see there that they don't get to see in China. Maybe you'll recall that about 2 years ago they had those student protests. That's a big deal to the people in China. They can't do that. So that great big field, not field, but area of central Hong Kong that was inundated with tents and cut down two of the main travel arteries through town, was filled with tents that the students stayed in at night. And virtually all the visitors from China, well, this isn't related to ecotourism, it's certainly related to tourism, but come and look at that. Because here are people openly being able to demonstrate against their government. Totally new to them, so it's, kind of unique, and they'd all stop and take pictures with the students, take pictures of all the signs, buy little trinkets from there that they can take back and show people. But very interesting nonetheless.
I would add that, of course, tourism is also a significant and important economic activity for Mexico. In the case of Mexico, Mexico receives every year around 33 million people who visit Mexico. Mexico is one of the it's among the top 10 most visited countries in the world. And of course, tourism needs to be sustainable. And tourism needs to be performed in a way that respects local culture, but also we need to create a form of tourism that develops the right conditions for our ecology. So there are significant and very important new ways of doing tourism in Mexico in a similar way to the very successful ecotourism model that Costa Rica has developed. And those are critical, and they are very important because there is a growing trend of tourism from all over the world, people who are looking for that sort of tourism. And it's really critical to make that happen. Tourism is a significant, important part of our economy, as I was telling you. And Mexico, for example, last year got revenues from tourism for over $18 billion last year, which is very important. We want to start moving from the traditional tourism, which goes, of course, to the beach resorts and to the cultural destinations, to do more and more ecotourism, because it's a sensible thing and it's a more smart thing to do.
And agritourism too, because what we have found out is that we help communities, and helping communities may also respect human rights. And what type of human rights are we trying to reach? We're trying to break gaps between poor and the very, very riches. And we have found out that if you point
Czechoslovakia, today Czech Republic, became independent state at the end of First World War out of the defeated countries of Austria and Germany. We have been 600 years part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy from 600 and still are in very close touch with the Austrians. Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic is like Georgia, the size of Georgia, 10.5 million people. It's one of the highest industrialized countries in Europe and probably in the world. It's been industrialized very heavily already by Austrians in 19th century, 18th century, and because Czechs have good schools, good education, and good apprentice systems, so there was always abundance of skilled labor that brought in the industries. That's what Georgia doesn't have any skilled labor, very difficult to get. I just brought a Czech company here, and they're struggling with getting people who can weld or who can bend the wire or things like that. Education, which we call the apprentice systems, doesn't exist in Georgia. Anyway, we have also big tourism. Prague is a very famous city in Middle Europe, next to Vienna. I don't know how many millions of people go there every year, and obviously there is a problem with devastation or damage done by tourism to buildings which are in use since 11th. There are some houses right next to the castle which have been built in 11th century and they are still used normally by living people or offices. So it's a very old country by itself. Bohemia was a kingdom in 980. Was the first king there. It's a very old country. Bohemia, the name comes from the tribe name Bohems, and Bohemia became the center of Czechoslovakia. Czech Republic consists of Bohemia and Moravia. I'm from Moravia. We fight the Bohemians because they are like we have Washington here and Atlanta. Everything in Washington is big. And we have the same thing in Prague. People in Prague are born for high positions in the state administration. In Brno, where I'm from, we just work hard. Anyway, I came here 48 years ago, in 1968, as I told you, and never left practically. My first 3 years was in Carrollton, Georgia. So I worked as an architect for Southmore Company and learned a lot in a hurry. And from 72 in Atlanta, and from 83 on my own company, which I still have. And we, as architects, we are very much involved in ecology and in preserving old things and nature. What we inherited from communism from 1948 to 1989, Czechoslovakia was governed by a communist party, which created poverty. They said we take from the rich and distribute it so that everybody were equally rich. Yeah, they took it from the rich and then it disappeared and everybody remained equally poor. That's what socialism brings you to table, communism. So they didn't have any respect to preserving nature, and the environment was grossly neglected. The area from North Bohemia, but the strong chemistry industry is concentrated. You drove in, and there was, have you been to the steel area in Pittsburgh, Gary? You come to Gary, the dark cloud used to be. In that part was a yellow cloud over a huge pier. Each area
president tonight, Consul General of Munich. What are the stylistic or cultural reasons behind changing your country's name from the Czech Republic to Czechia? Has there been any backlash from the Czech people or the international community over this name change?
There's no official change, actually. It's for journalism. Because they didn't like to say always Czech Republic, it's too long. So they started taking Czechia. So it was invented by journalists. And because it's so practical for everybody, so it became so approved for public publications or public speeches that you are allowed to use it, but it's not proper. And if you write any proper documents, you have to use the name Czech Republic. Czechia, Germans came up with practically. They don't say, they never said Czechoslovakia. They said Czechis, Czechia. But most of European states have this similar situation. Romania, Austria, Germany, Germania. So everybody abbreviated the name of their state to something which was palatable to all the writers and for just speaking between people. Again, you don't use Czechoslovakia, Czechia. So it's not formally proper.
Thank you. The next question will be for Director Hanratty from Hong Kong and be asked by Claire Chang.
Director Hanratty, we appreciate you coming tonight. Culturally, are there still remnants of British traditions visible in Hong Kong society today, resulting from British involvement in Hong Kong for 150 years? Does this create a unique culture in Hong Kong compared to other major Chinese cities?
Good question. I expected it in Chinese, but I'll answer it in English. I think I said earlier, this is the 20th year since the handover. And during those 150 years of British rule in Hong Kong, of course a lot of things had to embed themselves, not the least of which, and one of the most important of which, is that it's a bilingual state. It's a bilingual city. Virtually everybody speaks English to some degree, even the cab drivers, the poorest of people. You tell them I want to go to Wong Chai, they understand. I want to go to Sensat Joy, they understand. I'm looking for a restaurant, they understand. During the 23 years that I've been a consultant to the Economic and Trade Office, I've never made a trip to Hong Kong where I've ever had a problem in communicating. Now remember earlier I told you that I learned Chinese. I learned Mandarin. They speak Cantonese, which is entirely different. I had a lot of friends who told me, Gene, if you can speak Mandarin, it'll be easy to learn Cantonese. 23 years later, I can tell you that it's not. But the other very important thing, Claire, is that they have the rule of law. They have this English rule that we're familiar with, and it's a free and independent judiciary. And the Court of Final Appeals does not rest in Beijing or someplace else like people think. It rests in Hong Kong. So those are two very important things. A lot of the streets still maintain the British names. Some of the areas of town, such as Admiralty, the British left, and there was, and I use this as a term of endearment, not to slight or slur, but there was sort of an ethnic cleansing of the government after the Union Jack went down and the flag of Hong Kong with the Bauhinia flower on it went up, and that virtually all of their civil service from day one on July the 1st, 1997 were Chinese. My boss in New York City is a Brit, and he calls himself a civil service dinosaur. He's one of the very few Brits that are left there in civil service. They were given an option whether to stay in the government, in the civil service if they wanted to, but they were offered some very, very attractive separation packages, and most of them took that and either stayed there in Hong Kong and went into the private sector or back to England itself. There's still a lot of English pubs around. I would say that it was the British who brought rugby to there, and they just finished the World Championship Rugby Sevens in Hong Kong, which is an immense event there. You know, probably don't know what Rugby Sevens are here, but you go to Hong Kong and it's huge. It's huge in that Pacific area, really. Those are things I can't clear. The lights are so bright, I don't even know where you are now. Those are the things that, the immediate things that come to mind that are still a carryover from British colonial rule. So the important ones to take are the language and the judicial system, certainly.
Thank you. The next question will be for Consul General Diaz de Leon from Mexico. It will be asked by Ashley Cheever and translated by Elisa Fontanilla.
Buenas noches, Cónsul General Díaz de León. Hemos escuchado mucha elocuencia de varios políticos y delegados de los Estados Unidos acerca de la reforma migratoria. Una perspectiva alternativa puede ser exactamente lo que nuestro país necesita para entonces empezar el proceso de reforma. ¿Hay algún consejo o recomendaciones que pueda ofrecer para ayudar a la reformación de inmigraciones? Good evening, Consul General Diaz de Leon. We have heard much rhetoric coming from various U.S. Politicians and delegates about immigration reform. An alternative perspective may just be what our country needs in order to aid it in this long process of reformation. Is there any advice, insight, or policy recommendations you can offer to help aid immigration reform?
Well, thanks for the question. And you can probably imagine it's a question I get pretty often in some way or another. But there's a lot of things to be said. But first of all, I think I would start out by saying that no country in the world, including Mexico, is in the business of telling Americans what they should do about their laws. So whatever happens with American immigration laws is an issue that should be and must be resolved by Americans. Of course, we do have a stake on the issue, of course, because there's millions, in our case, of Mexicans who are part of that situation and that would be affected by change of American law in terms of immigration. But Mexico understands very well the United States' right to have laws, its right to enforce its immigration laws. We have immigration laws too, and we enforce our immigration laws too in Mexico. So there's no confusion in that sense. Sometimes a lot of people think that Mexico has a problem with American immigration laws. No, we don't. On the contrary, we understand that very well. We do think, and this is something that Mexico has discussed openly with the United States and with other countries in the region, that we have a system that right now going on in our region in terms of immigration that is not really working very well. It's pretty dysfunctional. The United States has about roughly somewhere around 12 million people who are here undocumented. About half of those people come from Mexico. You can say the other way around. There's about 6 million people in the US who are undocumented who do not come from Mexico. And actually the number of people who are here undocumented from Mexico has gone down significantly. So one of the things that we need to understand when we discuss what we want to do about our immigration system in the region, or what America wants to do with its immigration system, is to understand that immigration, the word I always use, not only I, but is that you need to always remember that migration is a moving target. What does that mean? That what we are seeing now is not what used to be a little while ago, and it's not what we're going to be seeing in the future. And immigration has changed drastically in the United States in the past few years. For example, during the past 5 years, at least during the past 5 years, Mexican migration to the US has been going down dramatically. The number of people coming from Mexico into the United States are at their lowest levels. We have never seen numbers as small Mexicans coming to the United States since the last Great Depression of the 1930s. Nowadays, the US authorities in the US border, for example, they stop more Central Americans than they do Mexicans. And that's been going on for at least 5 years in a row. Nowadays, the net migration, we're talking about people who are coming and people who are going back, net migration between Mexico and the United States is negative towards Mexico. It means more people are going back to Mexico than those who are coming. That's been going on for at least 5-6 years. So that means, among other things, that this is not necessarily connected to the economy, because the American economy ended its recession about 5 years ago. And after the recession ended in the United States and the economy started bouncing back, that did not create a new attraction of people coming in. So there are other forces in place which are demographic. So we need a system that recognizes those realities. We understand that the United States needs to look at those systems, but we also need to understand that a lot of that migration, that people who are coming to the United States are coming here because there are certain industries that they have been attracting them, especially the agricultural industry and some other services industries. The agricultural industry, for example, of Georgia, over 70% of the people who work in the fields in Georgia are immigrants. The agricultural industry in this country would not survive without immigrants. So that needs to be recognized. So what we need to think about together between countries in the region is how do we set up a system that we work on together, that we talk about together, that recognizes the forces of the labor forces that are there and the forces of our demographics. Because, of course, demographics in the United States are very specific in the sense that certain parts of the United States population are not growing anymore in terms of the number of people that are being born. And in certain areas, they are needing to bring immigrants into the country. But let me tell you something. Mexican demographics are changing drastically too. And that's one of the factors that are behind this drop in immigration. The number of people being born in Mexico, statistically in relative terms, are at the lowest levels that we have seen in terms of people per household being born. Some demographers, for example, in Mexico estimate that the Mexican population will stabilize sometime in the next decade. That means that we will stop growing in terms of population. Because most people in Mexico, unlike what is a very common belief, most people in Mexico do not live in the countryside. Most people in Mexico live in the cities. That means we have less babies. And that's been going on for a long time. Again, demographics. And demographics are very stubborn. You don't change those very easily. So unless we do something to recognize demographics, unless we do something to recognize the forces of the labor markets that are in our region, at some point, Mexico or Canada and the United States, for example, in North America, we might start competing with each other to attract labor from other regions. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. So again, what Mexico thinks is that we understand the need for the United States to come to a consensus about what they want to do with their population policies and with the immigration policies, but it needs to be sensible. We think it needs to recognize these realities, and of course, it always needs to be humane. It needs to understand humane realities and deal with people in a humane manner. That'll be my answer.
Would anyone else like to add anything about immigration? Okay. Our next question will be for Consul General Venegas Morales from Costa Rica. It will be asked by Emily Kula and translated by Ashley Schubert.
Bienvenidos, Consul General Venegas Morales. Los planes futuros que involucran el desarrollo de la Gran Canal están relativamente cerca de la frontera con Costa Rica. ¿Tiene el gobierno preocupaciones sobre este uso de la tierra y el potencial para el aumento de tráfico a través de la región centroamericana? Welcome, Consul General Venegas Morales. The future plans involving the development of the Nicaraguan Grand Canal appear relatively close to the Costa Rican border. Does the Costa Rican government have concerns over this land use and the potential for increased traffic through the Central American region?
I feel so lucky with one speaking Spanish and the other one translating in English. You know, that makes you very, very, very happy with this. Okay, we do have concerns, but not in a bad way, but in a good way. Why? Because it makes us challenge ourselves. Because of our geographical position, we are used to seeing people and goods traveling along our country. And we do not feel threatened neither from the Panama Canal and now not either for the Nicaragua Canal if they finish it at some point. Why? Because we are investing on making our own dry canal. We're trying to reconnect because we have had both coasts connected by train since the early 1900s, okay? But right now we're trying to connect it in a very biggest way through a very modern highway that goes through our port in Limon, which is the Caribbean side, to Punta Arenas, which is the Pacific side. And we are also investing a lot of money in port structure. And we trust international law system. So if something is going to happen, like let's say at an environmental level in the border between Costa Rica and Panama, in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, we're going to go to an international court system, which we have already done. We have a couple of cases right there. So yes, we're concerned, but we are investing money. And we know that it will bring some more jobs to our people and to the foreigners that have became our own people.
Thank you. Our next question will be for Consul General Novak from the Czech Republic and will be asked by Julia Sherman.
Welcome, Consul General Novak. Post-industrialization in the Czech Republic has caused air pollution, acid rain, erosion, and deforestation. How is the Czech government planning to prevent the effect of post-industrialization, and what policies are in place to resolve these concerns?
I didn't hear you. Say it again, please.
Post-industrialization in the Czech Republic has caused air pollution, acid rain, erosion, and deforestation. How is the Czech government planning to prevent the effects of post-industrialization, and what policies are in place to resolve these concerns?
Let me start explaining something else. I'm not the consul general. I'm an unpaid honorary consul. So we have consulates into career diplomats and private diplomats. So myself, I'm really amateur, working 25 years for free. Costs you a lot of money and time every year. To your questions, if I understood correctly, I'm bad of hearing, I must say. I'm guessing what you asked. Was it something about the environment? And pollution. I started talking about pollution in my introduction. There are areas in Czech Republic, northern Bohemia, northern Moravia, on the border with Poland. There is a lot of coal mines in that area between Moravia and Poland, and a lot of steel, a lot of chemistry, chemical industry in northern Bohemia. They create mess in the air, but there are laws, same like here, that limits how much pollution are industry which goes into the ground to grow better, which pollutes and doesn't create an organic produce. I'm fairly satisfied with the effort which the state and local governments are devoting to cleaning up the industrial waste and industrial pollution. Waters have been recently an confluence of Elbe and Verdun. Those are two big rivers. The Elbe is the larger one, which ends in Hamburg, in Germany. And you see that the Czech part of that river enters the Elbe, which flows to Germany, is yellowish. You clearly see the difference in color because of pollution of that water, which is caused by deteriorating sewage systems. I was involved in a project in Prague in the early 90s. They are losing about 30% of distributed water in the ground because of the piping is so old, almost at that time so old and rotten, and too much water was lost. It was also caused by people didn't pay anything for it. It was state property and people didn't pay for water at that time. Industry was getting everything for free because it belonged to the state. The inheritance from the past is still bothering the cleanliness of the environment, whether it is in the air or on the ground. But they're catching up in this. I spent 2 years, a lot of money with a group of Americans to show them how to clean up their waters in Prague, University of Prague. And we designed for them a way how to relocate the wastewater treatment plant in Prague to a city of Munich, which is about 30 miles away from there. It never came to it because they didn't find the money to rebuild it, redo it, so they made minor improvements in their wastewater system by replacing the small openings in their tubing. It's a perforation, called perforation of small size, was replaced by tubes with larger perforation, so that the sedimentation tanks were getting more oxygen, and the water which was standing there was cleaned up faster and better. So there are efforts which sometimes lead to something. Many times don't lead anywhere because the administration, or similar like here, takes forever to do anything through the administration. You have to do everything through private industries. So after 48 years in America, I say, well, it doesn't matter what the administration does. Private sector will always bail him out of it. America is based on private sector, which produces practically 1/3 of the national product of the whole world. 330 million people produce 1/3 of the world GDP. The second third is done by 27 countries in Europe. This is 530 million people. And the last third part is done by the other 5 billion people which live around the world. So you are living in an extremely rich country, extremely productive country. I never understood why euro has more value than dollar when our productivity here in the United States is like 62% higher than in European countries altogether. So it's encouraging. You are beneficiaries of this system, which does speak for itself. Back to Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia in 1938 was the 8th in the world in GDP per capita. One of the smallest countries in the world, but most industrialized, and the first country in the world which was making artificial fuel from That was the goal of his possession, and he lost all the industry without fighting. Because the Munich Conference in 1938, when British, French, and Germans got together and they took part of Czechoslovakia without any consulting with us, they gave it to Italy. And Mr. Daladier and Mr. Chamberlain, they went home, and Chamberlain was coming off the airplane saying, "Victory, I say to by giving away Czechoslovakia to Italy." And I'm probably losing it here. But it's a small country which is extremely, people work hard. There are a lot of good workers, good skilled labor, as I mentioned before, and highly industrialized country. We have the best nanotechnologies in the world, for instance, and many other things which were invented at that time. Georgia Tech is cooperating with Prague Institute of Technology on the cybersecurity, which is, they say, superior in Czech Republic than being here in Georgia. Georgia Tech is about MIT actually in cybersecurity advancement. So it's a small country, but very rich in investments in research, research company. IBM, Hewlett Packard, you name it, the big American company. Most of them have research centers in Czech Republic. It's amazing. Being from there, I'm proud of what they have. But it's something to value, like I said about the private industry here. Czechs have the diligence and they're smart. They always find a way how to fix it. Thank you.
Would anyone like to discuss industrial pollution concerns in their country?
I'll make a quick comment about Hong Kong. As most of you probably know, you've seen pictures of the Hong Kong skyline. It's iconic, no matter which side of the harbor you're looking from. And in the past 25 years, since the manufacturing has increased across the border in Shenzhen, it's created a terrible problem with pollution. Hong Kong is doing all it can itself to correct it. Use of compressed natural gas, solar energy, and things of that nature. But it's going to be a continuing problem, and one that I'm not sure that they'll ever get control of, because Mother Nature being what it is, the prevailing winds just bring all that down from Shenzhen into Hong Kong. So there are days when you can go up on the peak, for those of you who have traveled to Hong Kong. You can look down over that vast, huge, beautiful panorama. You can't see it all. So it's a shame, but it's a problem, and I'm not sure they'll ever get it under total control.
Have you asked about electricity or power?
Industrial pollution, so from industry, so any of that.
Well, I can only say that since 1935, Czechoslovakia was selling power to Austria and to Germany. And so it is all the time. We have surplus of power generation. Maybe that's why we don't have enough of investment in other resources like wind, water, and nuclear.
And I think the international community itself has enlightened itself, because they have been realizing that the world has been changing, that we have been getting warmer, that we need less emissions in order to survive if we want to live a couple of million as we know life as today. So I guess there's like a type of pressure from consumers about how are you producing the goods that you're selling outside of your country. That's why you have to keep some sort of standards. The thing is, there's a great discussion in the international world about how do you make low-income countries pollute the less, or medium-income countries pollute even better. Because if you think like India, they have a lot of pollution going on, but how can the economy crash? So this is the great question nowadays, and I guess we are like a whole community trying to figure that out. So that's what I would ask.
I would basically add exactly what Dora is saying, that there is one of the most significant conversations that are going on at the multilateral level among nations is, of course, how can nations talk to each other and reach an agreement in terms of establishing quotas for emissions, because we all share the same atmosphere. But of course, there are different conditions for different countries. So there's, like Flora was saying, there's a lot of, for example, developing economies or very rapidly industrializing economies, such as India, China, and many of the medium-sized economies, such as like Mexico or Brazil, which are economies that are industrializing as we speak. But of course, they are very concerned. There is a lot of concern of how that industrialization in those large economies, middle-sized economies, are going to deteriorate the global environment. On the other side, for all these developing nations, they think that they have a right to do this, to go through this industrialization, and they're not very happy that the Europeans and North Americans are telling them that they should not industrialize when they have already done it. So some of these economies say we have a right to industrialize and do what you did 100 years ago. Of course, the problem is, I mean, we all had the same planet, we all had the same environment, and we cannot do now what was done 100 years ago by some of the now developed economies, because our planet will not be able to sustain it. So we have worked at the multilateral level on multilateral agreements between most of the nations in the world to establish quotas, self-imposed quotas on emissions. Each country, according to the size of its economy, according to the size of its industrialized activities, has established quotas by themselves to limit the emissions of CO2 and other gases into the atmosphere. And the problem is to make sure that countries that have signed and that have taken these compromises to the rest of the world, that they fulfill their promises. And of course, international law is a very tricky thing because there's no one to enforce it. The only way to enforce international law is by pressure from the rest of the world. And the leading nations of the world need to be the ones who lead the way in those areas.
And by the way, as Consul General Mexico said, we establish our own quotas. Let's say like Costa Rica is going to be zero emissions for 2021. We're supposed to be there by 2021. But we still are trying to see how the world is going to react, because that is going to mean that our jobs and our products and everything we export is going to have it's going to be more expensive than if you didn't have those standards. So at the very end of the day is a thing that goes into each individual. Are you willing to pay a little bit more for something that was produced in a certain way in order to preserve your planet, or you just want to keep on going as you are today? At the very end, it's the consumer who has the last word.
Thank you. The next question will be for Director Hanratty from Hong Kong, and it will be asked by Nancy Bishop.
Say it in Chinese if you want.
Cantonese.
Well, see, that's the problem. I don't speak Cantonese. You can do it in Mandarin.
I wish. Good evening, Director Hanratty. From your perspective, does the one country, two systems policy lead to greater tension and separatist movement, or do you feel it resolves some of this tension? Also, how will Hong Kong's new Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, plan to navigate the one country, two systems policy with China?
How much time do I have? Hong Kong just had its election, and Miss Carrie Lam was elected as their chief executive designate. Chief executive is the term they use for their highest ranking official as opposed to president or prime minister or whatever. Carrie Lam has a long career in government civil service. That was her primary position before becoming chief secretary, before being elected the chief executive for Hong Kong. Non-attribution, please. These are personal opinions, and I speak for myself here. She's got her hands full. One country, two systems is a very unique experiment that Deng Xiaoping came up with as he and Margaret Thatcher were discussing just what would happen with Hong Kong at the end of the 99-year lease that Great Britain had with certain parts of Hong Kong. So it's a very unique system, Yiguo Liangsi in Chinese, one country, two systems. This allows Hong Kong, under their constitution, a high degree of autonomy. No place in that constitution does it say that they are totally self-governing, but they have, with the exact words, a high degree of autonomy. She's got her hands full for this reason. I think the younger generation there were very well educated, and many who come to the United States and other educational institutions around the world have gotten a look at complete and total democracy. Hong Kong doesn't have that per se. They have a high degree of autonomy. We could really, really get into this. But this younger generation are it's their pro-democracy movement. And they want complete and total, they want separation from China. That's never going to happen, folks. China will never let go of Hong Kong. Ever. Now, as to whether or not they would ever allow them a complete and total free vote in their elections, they tried to get Hong Kong that. But the pro-democracy movement a few years ago, when they had the demonstrations, snuffed that out. And the reason for that was because what China was offering, and this is pretty unique for a communist country to be offering this, they were offering the Hong Kong the right for every citizen of legal voting age, the right to vote on the candidates. Okay, now let me give you a little bit more background on the candidates. As it exists right now, there is a committee of 1,200, the mighty and powerful, as somebody called them. And they come from all sectors of society. Religious, all different religions have people that are part of this 1,200. Politicians, well, you can't really say politicians too much because they've only got 20 years of self-governance that they're learning. Policemen, educators, longshoremen, taxi cab drivers, whatever. These 1,200 are called the Selection Nominating Committee. They nominate the candidates, and there's a long and involved process that I could describe for that. And they're allowed to come up with 2 or 3 people to present. They were going to be allowed to present 2 or 3 nominees to present to the public for the public to then vote on. But the pro-democracy movement snuffed that out and said, no, unless we can also have preliminaries where we make our own nominations of people to run for chief executive, we don't want it. So it didn't pass in the legislature by just a couple of votes from the number of people that were in the pro-democracy movement there. So what I see happening is the older generation understands communism. And they're fearful, I think, in my opinion, of doing anything to sway the vote one way or the other. So they're happy with the situation as it exists. They didn't care about that. But the younger generation wants more autonomy and more freedom. And she's going to have a problem with that. And I dare say within the 5 years of her tenure, and their elected officials there, as chief executive, I should say, get 1 5-year term, she's going to have more demonstrations to put up with. And I'm sure that they're going to be contentious, and that's going to be the biggest obstacle for her to overcome. So there is turbulence within the Hong Kong society between the older generation and the younger generation. And I don't see it going away too quickly. Any follow-on for that?
Very unique.
It is very unique. And I just want to add on that I'll give you is we talked about one country, two systems. The biggest thorn in the side of China right now is Taiwan. They want Taiwan back into the Greater China fold. And so they want this experiment, this very unique one country, two systems to work. And they're trying to lead Taiwan towards just such a thing also. Now, whether that'll come to pass, I think it probably will. In our lifetime, we'll probably see that happen. Personally.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be for Consul General Diaz de Leon from Mexico. It will be asked by Nina Sengupta and translated by Elisa Fontanillas.
Bienvenidos, Cónsul General Díaz de León. Al alejarnos de la tensión que nuestro gobierno y comunicaciones imponen, nosotros como ciudadanos queremos tener una discusión abierta sobre los temas que han ocurrido entre los Estados Unidos y México. ¿Qué podemos hacer como estudiantes de bachillerato para promover la unidad entre nosotros y nuestros vecinos mexicanos?
Welcome, Consul General Diaz de Leon. Turning away from the tension imposed by our media and government, we as citizens want to have an open discussion on current issues between the United States and Mexico. What can we do as high school students to promote unity between us and our Mexican neighbors?
Well, what can you do? I think you can do what you are doing right now. You need to do a lot of exercises, asking questions, and trying to access information about the nature of the relationship, of what's going on in the relationship between the United States and Mexico, and don't just rely on what you read on the social media or what you might read in some specific cable news channel. Make up your own decisions, make up your own minds, ask a lot of questions, talk to a lot of people. But of course, I would also ask you. I also suggest to talk to a lot of people who have experience dealing with people here, Mexicans who are here, of all kinds of people, Mexicans who are here, but also Americans who have a direct experience dealing with Mexico. And there's a lot of things going on that sometimes a lot of people don't really know about. Mexico is the second buyer of the United States in the world. The only country that buys more U.S. goods in the world is Canada. Mexico is the second in the world buyer of U.S. goods in the world. That means that Mexicans love buying U.S. products. That means that Mexicans love the United States a lot. We have a lot of affinities. There's over 1 million Americans who live in Mexico. Not a lot of people know about that. Every single day, the U.S.-Mexico border, at the U.S.-Mexico border, 1 million people cross the border every single day with documents, legally. We have a total trade of over $500 billion. That's about $1 million per minute are being traded between the United States and Mexico. I'll give you more numbers. About 6 million jobs in the United States rely on trading with Mexico. And they are created because of trading with Mexico. So make a lot of questions, ask a lot of questions. Why is that all that happening, and not a lot of people know about it? There's a lot of things that are going on in North America that people usually in the United States don't look at Canada and Mexico with, because we are taken for granted in many ways. But I can tell you something. I think that that's my personal opinion, but I'm not the only one. The United States has benefited very strongly of having two very good neighbors throughout history. And both Canada and Mexico are not only the two main trading partners of the United States in the world, but are also Canada's and Mexico's prosperity rely on America's prosperity. If the United States does well, Mexico does well, and Canada does well. So if you ever hear someone saying that Mexico benefits from something going wrong or something going bad to the United States, you're not really thinking straight. Because the Mexican economy and a lot lot of the people who live in Mexico need America to do well. Whenever America goes into a recession, like it happened a few years ago, that was terrible for Mexico. When the United States economy bounces back, that is great news for Mexico. And the other thing that is very important to understand is that when a country has such deep connections with another, I'll talk about Mexico. I already told you a little bit about the economy, but let's talk about people. Mexico, there's one. I already told you there's 1 million Americans in Mexico. There's about 11.5 million Mexicans in the United States. That's about 1 of every 10 Mexicans. If you consider the children of those 11.5 million people, that number has actually gone down, by the way. It used to be larger. If you consider the children of those 11.5 million people who were born in Mexico, who are now in the United States, who are born in the United States, those children, then we're talking about somewhere around 36 million people who are either born in Mexico or are the child of a Mexican. That's about 1 of every 10 people in the United States. So demographics are enormous. Trade is enormous. We can also add the historical connections. A significant part of the United States was part of Mexico. A significant part of the United States has historical connections with Mexico, California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Historically, they're all connected to Mexico, to our common history. We share millions of families. Millions of families in the United States have both Mexicans and Americans in the same house. Millions of families. So that's why I was arguing at the beginning, trying to say at the beginning that you could make the argument that there's no bilateral relation for the United States, that making it work, making sure that it works well, affects millions of people's lives. If we don't make it work, and if we create a problem for that relationship, we're going to make life very hard and very difficult for millions of people in the US and in Mexico. One last thing. American security and America's well-being and America being safe is also critical for Mexico. And there are probably no 2 countries in the world who have as much at stake to making sure that the United States is safe as Canada and Mexico. So there are probably no greater partners in many ways, and stronger partners that the United States has, than we, your neighboring countries in North America. We don't show up in the news as often, in some ways, but we are definitely there.
Could anyone else comment on how our students could foster stronger relationships with any of your countries?
Well, I would tell you that there's numerous, literally hundreds of exchange programs between high schools, principally colleges and Hong Kong universities that take place. And the major universities in Hong Kong all have a program that are government subsidized, where in an effort to internationalize their student bodies are literally paying for especially PhD candidates to come to Hong Kong and study in their universities. And it wouldn't be as hard as you think, because all their universities teach in English. So that's one that I'm sure all of our countries do, but one for you to consider and think about.
I would just suggest to open your eyes, open your ears, open your hearts, because at the very end of the day, we're all people, we're all human beings, and we all suffer the same deception, we all have the same great days, the bad days, and it's all a matter of learning how to share and learning how to respect each other. So if you ever, I was talking to the ladies that I was sitting with, if you ever have a chance to travel around and to speak to people, do it. You will be amazed of what you learn from one another. So I would suggest that. Just be yourselves and talk a lot and have fun.
Thank you so much. This next question is going to be a dual question for both Costa Rica and Czech Republic, and it will be asked by Amelia Imar.
General Venegas Corrales and Consul General Novak. According to the most recent census data, almost 9% of the population in Costa Rica is foreign-born, with the majority being from Nicaragua. Also, 5% of the population in the Czech Republic is foreign-born, with the majority being from Ukraine. There's an influx of the foreign-born population creates stress on your current infrastructure. Additionally, does this trend impact employment opportunities for either of your citizens?
Okay. I'm not going to tell you the whole story about Costa Rica and Nicaragua, but what we can say is that Costa Ricans like negotiation over confrontation, in that we have spent a lot of money in our social system instead of our military. We do not have a military system. We abolished it in 1948. So everyone wants to go to Costa Rica, but migration is a challenge. But to us, human rights and social protection are privileged. So it's not even like a pressure. We have right now a campaign going on in our country because if you go and talk to Nicaraguan people living in Costa Rica or Nigerian people or United States people, they feel welcome. They feel like Costa Rican. So if you talk to them, they are very thankful to have a place to live, a school for their children, and a health system, and a plate of food. And we work side by side with the United Nations to create a system that is welcoming to all that want or do need to go to Costa Rica, because sometimes it's not that you want to go, it's you have to leave your natural environment because it's so unsafe or you do not find a job or whatever. So we are very welcome. And as it happens here, usually people go to Costa Rica and they take jobs we no longer want. If you think about coffee picking or some other agricultural things, we had a lot of Nicaraguan people working, and not only Nicaraguan, we have people from Panama too working. The indigenous, they come and pick up the coffee and they stay in our farms and they come and go. And we have special programs for that. So I don't think it's like, we all have our challenges, but I think we need to include people on our taxation systems in order for all to participate, and that is our goal in the future. How about you?
Czechoslovakia from the beginning was very open to incoming different kind of people. First of all, there was very strong industry, a lot of machinery, and also an excellent education. So a lot of countries on the east of Czechoslovakia at that time, Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, they sent all their students up to Czechoslovakia to learn because the education was better. After the Second World War, the whole Middle Europe and Eastern Europe got messed up by the war and by movement of people, by movement of borders between among the nations. Poland, Russia, Germany, and Czech Republic with Czechoslovakia, with Russia. We lost part of Czechoslovakia to Russians, which is now part of Ukraine. And that's a leading question, or answer to your question. What about those 150,000 or 190,000 Ukrainians who work in Czech Republic now? Well, that's hardly anything new. Mexicans to work here, and as you said, people don't want to do certain jobs. It's not selecting jobs. It turns out to be natural. You lean to do what you like to do and what you do better than others. And Czechs graduated to also better jobs, and Ukrainians took over those menial jobs. A lot of construction people are Russians. Also the poverty in Ukraine and in Western Russia is something which you can't understand. So for them to go to Czech Republic, live there, work there, is like for us to go to America, Czechs to America. That's totally, they admire the system in Czech Republic. They are supported. That's a good social system which gives them all the opportunity. They go to schools, there's no questions asked, they get the visa. If they don't have visa, graduate, they get the visa. So there is no problem employing more people. As I said, they don't do the highly skilled work most, but there are a lot of them highly educated. You'll get a lot of, I worked in Prague 1996 and 98. I was renovating an old hotel. And I had like maybe 300 people working on the project. And out of them, at least 150 was Ukrainians. The problem is sometimes to tell them what to do, because the foreman was Czech, and there was 25 Ukrainians working for him. Fortunately, or unfortunately, we had to learn Russian under the communism. That was the very basic. Second World War, we had to learn German, and after being liberated by Russians, we had to learn the Russian, which is easy for us because it's Slavic language, and it's a lot of similar word vocabulary, different pronunciation, but we can learn it quickly. So that language difference and problem was bridged over, and I had some of the best workers on the job, Ukrainians, and they didn't even want to leave the job site. They would like to sleep somewhere in cut-offs of your insulation. I found guys there. I was going home at 5 o'clock and walked through the hotel just to see that everything's. I found legs sticking from a heap of something. They lived poorly because they didn't have enough money to buy many things. But it's intelligent people, they are skilled, and we absorb them now. Today, Czech Republic has the lowest unemployment rate in Europe, 4.8, and the highest employment rate, which I don't know the percent, but I just was listening to the governor of the Czech National Bank, who is a friend of mine, Mr. Stock, and he made a statement and told us the numbers too. So, 100,000 people, 10 million people, it's like nothing. It just absorbs very easily. And there is no nationalistic problem. They are not hated. And there's no political fight, not political football about the absorption of Ukrainians among Armenian Czechs. So it's not brought up daily in papers, discussed whether we should have them or not. That's a given. So we don't worry about it. You live with it, and they live with it. They are in America, Czech Republic, and they're happy, and we need them. So that's absolutely no problem. It doesn't lead to lack of employment for Czechs. There is so many openings still because the industry goes forward. There's a lot of construction going on, and we need a lot of workers to do it. So it's positive actually effect on the atmosphere, the working atmosphere in Czech Republic. The foreigners who come there. On the other hand, our political system, their political system, not American, they didn't accept any immigrant from Asia, or which bloody German people. This got crazy and invited a million people a year to stay with us. She caused a pretty great disaster. But we were strong, our people were strong, and Austrians on our south border and Hungarians on the southeast border, they were the same. So they blocked the income of all these refugees to Czech Republic. And we are actually now penalized by the European Union government that we haven't taken enough of the immigrants into our country. So it becomes critical what to do with them, because Germany now rejects some of them, and we are spread back into Europe. Those they don't want to throw away. So it's a game which the immigration causes and the politicians screw it up.
So, yes, I guess the conclusion is immigration is a challenge. We all have to create strategic partnerships in order to deal with it. And at the very end, the main thing is that we cannot forget they're human beings just like us, just trying to live a better, normal life. So, I guess that's it. What do you think?
Necessary, you know.
Hong Kong's very simple. They let very few immigrants in, period.
I would probably just add briefly, I told you a little bit about the moving target, and so in the sense of how things change very fast in terms of immigration and those sort of things in the world. And Mexico, for example, has been for many years, for example, a place which was traditionally an origin for migration. People who leave Mexico to migrate. That has evolved. Now, Mexico still is an origin of migration to a certain extent, although it's now negative, like I told you. But also, Mexico mostly now is becoming a transit country. It's a country through which most of the immigrants who are coming into the United States, they use Mexico as a transferring area in order to get to the United States, mostly from Central America, from Northern Central America. And Mexico is also a destination country for migrants. So thousands and thousands of migrants from, especially El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, are staying in Mexico instead of going to the United States. So all of that creates challenges, and Mexican authorities and Mexican society is facing a lot of the challenges the United States has faced for many years now, in terms of, okay, how do we create the proper legal systems, the proper social systems to cater and to deal with this population that is coming into our country, and they are foreigners, and they need, it is in our interest to help them integrate into the country, because if you let people in your country, they're in your country, but you isolate them, and you don't let them become part of your country, understand how your country works, understand how to access services, etc., that will create a very bad situation for them, but it also be very bad for your country too. So we are facing that challenge very strongly.
A good example of treatment of Mexican workers. I was in charge of a big project in San Antonio. German investment was my specialty. I came to the job site, was a major job site. There was about 500 Mexicans working here. I told the superintendent, 500 times $5,000, so apparently, how do you do it? He said, George, it's all remote. We have a great company. He gives them 6 months working permit, and it goes all through the payroll. They pay all what the Americans pay, so it's good. And they get extended their working permit to 12 months easily. You know who was the governor there at that time? George W. Bush. And he had it all resolved. But he was not able to do it as a president. president, because it doesn't work on the federal level, it works on the state level.
All right, well, thank you so much to all of our delegates for coming out tonight. I did want to thank some of the people who made this evening possible. Of course, Mrs. Darling, as well as our freshman cohort of Globalization Academy doing the research and coming up with these questions, some of which we didn't get to ask because I felt like we could barely even scratch the surface in the time we had. But as it is a school night, we'll be finishing up here. But we did also want to thank Mr. Savransky, Coach Sabby, for lending us his audiovisual equipment, as well as Will Matheson for doing our videography, Sandy Claire Bermudez for running our sound booth and the lights, and setting us up here. So thank you to all. And of course, thank you, Mr. Novak, Senor Venegas, Senor Diaz, and Mr. Hanratty for making the trek up here to Pope High School and having this evening. We do have some small gift bags that the students would like to present to the different delegates. Just let you go on up there.
I don't suppose these were all made in Hong Kong.